fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, and we're recording on a Thursday, and it's not normally, Thursdays aren't normally a day of peaches.
I know, usually I'm strictly a Monday, Tuesday girl, but...
Yeah, so what's going on? I just about dropped my...
I know, you were like, you realize it's a Thursday, right, Jennifer? And I was like, I can do it.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, honestly, I'll say this when our guest is, formally introduced, but I read his bio, and there was, a lot there that I just thought was so interesting.
Was it all the pictures?
It was all the pictures. No, it was, he just does so many different kinds of writing, and then I fell in love with the title of the book, and I thought, I'm going to mess up my whole schedule and Alan's by saying, yes, I will do a show on a Thursday.
Yeah, you canceled your dancing and everything like that?
No, I'm dancing tomorrow.
Yeah, well. And
I'm not going into town until tomorrow. So.
Right. And I wasn't sure if you'd be back. I knew you were up on that space flight with all the girls.
With Katy Perry, yeah.
Yeah,
The all-ladies space flight. Yeah, it did a number on my hair, but I'm back.
And now you can call yourself an astronaut.
A lady astronaut.
A lady astronaut. Oh, boy.
Like Lois Lane, lady reporter. Oh,
well, they're taking the flack for that, hey? Boy, they're getting a good beating for that, hey? That's pretty...
I'm just saying there's better things to do with $150,000.
Yeah, I'm I kind of rolled my eyes, but I do that a lot anyway. I guess that's
that's part of you.
Yeah, just getting old. I rolled them so much I lost my hair. Anyway, so let's talk about this. Let's bring the author in and let's talk about this book. It's Where the Nights Smell Like Bread, and it's Glen Peters. So thank you for being here, Glen.
You're welcome.
So where did this book come from? And the title is really good. Let's talk about that. So how did you get the idea for this book?
Well, I tell you, I got the idea because I needed a shakeup. I needed to reset my storytelling. And I did that by going to Europe. I went for 4 or 5 consecutive summers, and I made a lot of new friends. I began to learn the language. I began to get involved in the sorts of different lives people lead there. And suddenly, I just didn't have the same narrative threads anymore. I had to put them down, and I had to invent new ones. So it was a way of not telling the same old story, although in some ways this is, I guess the same old story. But, it's different in the sense that you're dealing with different types of personalities you come across in kind of old European countries. And you're dealing with the countries themselves, the environments, which really affect people. It's something we don't have a sense of here in the States, how history really just infuses their lives. And you're dealing with a different type of decadence, I guess, And so sort of immersing myself in that world and drawing what I could from it in terms of my own storytelling really powered this novel for me. And people say to me, is it a memoir? And no, not really. I mean, it's fiction. I'd say it's 70% fiction. But of course, you draw on the people you meet, the places you are, the adventures you have. And all of that sort of powers your storytelling. So, it was a good thing to do. And, it was such a good thing for me that last summer I bought a house in Umbria, Italy, little house, not a villa, not a palazzo, but it is my go-to place now when I want to write. When I'm working on a new project, I go to Umbria. I usually spend, the summers there, and I write. And, the phone doesn't ring. I don't have all sorts of stuff I need to take care of here in the States, and I just get away and I write. And again, ideas come. A new type of writing happens for me. So this is something I discovered. And I discovered after I just went ahead and had the adventure.
I love that, Glen. It's so funny. One of the reasons why I was like, I definitely have to do this show is because when I read about your book, being in Italy, 8 years ago I went to Italy for a few weeks, and it just like, it became immediately my favorite place on the planet. I set part of one of my books there. So I really understand what you're saying, how it's like, it changed me, like on a molecular level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly right. On a molecular level.
Yeah, I was like, I am not the same person that I was before that. So obviously you have a home in Umbria. Did you go all over Europe before you settled on Italy being your magic place, or was it immediate Italy, you're in love?
No, I've been to Europe several times, and I've seen many, many countries in both Eastern and Western Europe. I was in the Soviet Union during the Brezhnev years and during Perestroika. I was in the Eastern Bloc, Romania, Bulgaria, so forth. But I began to center on Italy because I just found the closest connection to who I am there. I'm Italian. My full name is Glen Peters Vecchione, which means the old one. I lived up to my name, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, I guess. But so I did feel a kind of cultural connection to Italy and Italians, although it had some definite distinctions that were very strange to me and took a lot of recalibrating. Particularly when you're not fluent in the language and you're forcing yourself to interact with people who don't speak English very well. And, as I say in the book, communication, when neither of one speaks the other's language fluently, communication is filled with hazardous extrapolations. So you have these interesting breakdowns in communications, which can be very amusing, at times, and other times can sort of get you into trouble. But I just enjoyed immersing myself in Italy. There's a kind of exuberance there and a sensuality there, and a wonderful kind of earthly, there's a practicality. I mean, here's a country that contains the Vatican with the Pope, and most people love the Pope, but they really pay no attention to him. I mean, it's a very socially progressive country. And I really did appreciate that. I appreciated feeling safe there.
Oh, sorry to groan. I'm like, yeah, I feel like we as humans right now, or many of us as humans, are just like searching for a place to really feel safe right now.
For sure. And it's a beautiful place to write from when you feel safe. So that in itself is liberating,
Well, Jennifer needs your phone number. She's going to be.
Yeah, I'm like, so, I mean, I'm not a psycho, but I would love to go to your. Are you going to host a writing retreat?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that question all the time. Yeah, I probably will. I'm doing some work on the house now, but yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. I have some property. I have a 500-year-old farmhouse, and then I have a barn in the back, which is 700 years old, and I want to kind of turn that into an art gallery. I have great neighbors. It's amazing. I live right in the middle of olive groves. Umbria is just south of Tuscany, and it's unspoiled. The tourists have not discovered it. It's very careful about keeping the landscape exact. When I look out my window, when I walk out onto my terrace, I see a landscape that, I look like I'm looking at the landscape behind La Gioconda. The 800-year-old mountain town on the top of the verdant hills and the valleys with the persimmon trees and the olive trees. It's just astonishing to see a landscape that goes back 500-600 years. The Renaissance painters. So for the soul, it's a terrific place to be. So yeah, I think it's a good place for writing.
Wow, you must spend a lot of time, I guess, in the book, detailing the location. The setting must be a character in itself.
Absolutely right, a character in itself. You're exactly right, and that is where we are. Interfaces with who we are. Even if you try not to, you're changed by your environment. And I wanted to explore that space. I think it's kind of underexplored in contemporary literature, at least. And I wanted to explore how different it is to live in a different place. And that's what I tried to do. So, yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's you got it. You got it. Good, you got it.
You got it. So, so with that being in mind, let's give out the basic. What happens in this story? What's the premise?
Well, the story is this fellow Marcanello, who's a 30-something Italian-American. He has a affectionate but dysfunctional relationship with his family. He meets someone in San Francisco who's he's attracted to, and this fellow is traveling with his then partner. And all the same, there seems to be some tension between the partner and the fellow. So when they leave, Alessandro stays in touch with Marcanello, my protagonist. And eventually, Mark returns to Italy to visit Alessandro, who has now broken up with his partner. And Alessandro opens up the world of Italy for his new American friend. They travel everywhere together. He meets other people. He develops a family through this connection with Alessandro. So, from there, the story has these exponential developments depending on the characters that Mark gets involved with. So you see various friendships developing and unraveling. You see Mark himself coming close to a great deal of danger as he steps into situations he does not have awareness of. And eventually it's a story where all of the characters involved, no matter how villainous some of them turn out to be, become heroes. One of my missions in writing a book like this is I wanted every character to be a hero. And I hope I've succeeded, because every character kind of redeems himself or herself in the end. And so that was kind of the uplift that I wanted to build into the storytelling. And I worked very hard to do it. It took a couple of tries before I quite got that right. So without spoiling it, that's pretty much what the story's about.
So there's obviously this dynamic and very sensual relationship with Alessandro. Do you ever, as a writer, fall in love with your characters? Like, do you get like a crush on them? Did you fall in love with Alessandro when you were writing this?
Another great question, Jennifer. Thank you. I think you have to love all of your characters as a writer. You have to love them. I think that Tolstoy said that. Love your characters. Even the odious ones, the hideous ones. You have to love them. And you have to trust them. And you have to allow them to tell their stories. Now, the tricky part about that is when I'm pulling out of myself to flesh out a character. Sometimes I see parts of myself that, I see a lot of me in what this character is doing and the way this character is behaving, but let it happen, you have to empower your characters. Love them and let them tell you their story. So the interesting thing about this book is it was powered by my characters. I had a superstructure, I had a plot I kind of threw together, but when I began developing my characters, they began to take over. They began to walk through my plot, and some of them said, no, not going there. No, I don't want to go there. I want to go here. I let them do it. So the story took interesting twists and turns. Occasionally you had to rein them back, like, no, that's a different book, not this one. But I let them tell me their stories. And honestly, there were mornings when I sat down to write a chapter, I had no idea where it was going to go. And suddenly I relaxed, and the characters told me their story, and there it was. It was actually a mystical experience when it happened. Because I was being told a story. I was channeling something. That was incredible. And it became the most enjoyable type of writing I'd ever experienced, So that was part of it. And the other part of it was allowing the as Alan said, the environment to assume its own gestalt and seduce the reader and bring up my own affection and my own surprise and my own delight in seeing these absolutely beautiful places, whether in Spain or in Italy, or in Basel, Switzerland, or in places in between, taking a bus ride through the Alps on the Simplon Pass, and absolutely astonishing views of mountains. So to allow that to happen. So I think you have to love the process of writing, and you have to love your characters. And when you fall in love, when you fall in love with them, the book is easy to write. I wrote this book in less than 3 months. I sat down, and after an initial struggle, well, the first chapter began as a short story. It was a long short story, and I put it away in a desk, and I submitted it here and there. Nobody wanted it. And finally, the story told me it wanted to be developed. The characters in the story said, we want more. Let us out. So I finally opened up the back end of it, and I built out the novel. And I was so glad I did that, because all my characters are happy now.
Yeah, they were picketing.
Yeah.
They were striking. So
Got
when you're done, when you finished the book, what was your emotional state like? Did you have a period of mourning for these characters? Did you miss them? Did you think about, should I, explore some of these side characters in different ways, and maybe they get their own book? What's it like when you say goodbye to your characters?
It was affectionate relief. I was ready to let them go, at least for the time being. They told their story. I told my story through the main character, who's of course less than half my age. And I was able to let them go. It's a kind of a breaking up at the end. But I was good. I was happy with the book. I knew we'd go through a good deal of editing. And I was prepared for that, but luckily the editing was light, and which was a relief to me, because I didn't want to have to reconfigure whole sections of it. So it was released, and it was a certain inspiration to do something else now, whether a continuation of that book or another book. But it was kind of a vote of confidence in myself, like, yes, I finished this. So yeah, it was a positive thing to be in the middle of it and to put it down finally. It's like, whew, I can have a life. I can go out with friends, I can...
So you dump them.
Yeah. Do a load of wash,
Yeah. That's fine. Being that you're so involved in your characters and the story, and it sounds like you're totally engulfed in it, how does this affect you going through what they go through? I mean, it's, at the end of the book, how do you think it's changed you?
That's a good question. Let me see if I can give you a good answer. I think when you seed your characters with pieces of you, with the kind of literary agenda to make them all heroes at the end, there's a certain amount of enlightenment that comes as the author. I know more about myself. And just as, people go into psychoanalysis because they have issues, I've kind of worked out my issues through my characters. So there's a certain healing that goes on. The character Mark Anello is kind of a clueless. That's part of his charm. He just doesn't get it. Stuff is right in front of him, and he just doesn't put the pieces together. He finally does. But when I was his age, I was, I think, a little more aware, a little more sophisticated than he is. But I didn't want to go there. I wanted to create this charming, slightly clueless fella, good-hearted, but just can't connect. Kind of sabotages everything that's good in his life. So on the tail end of that, I want to say that my favorite time to write is early in the morning. I get out of bed, I pour a cup of coffee for myself, and I sit down and I start banging away. And I think that's because in the morning I don't have any resistance. I'm not prone to self-censor. I'm closer to my subconscious, where you can draw on all of this great material, and it's powerful in the morning. If you wait until the afternoon, you begin your, the business of the day takes over, and you just don't have that access to the really good stuff. That's kind of the psychological process for me. Early morning is best.
So you're an early morning writer. Is that specifically with novels, or because I know you're also a poet, you write a lot of other types of work as well. Do you find that you have a different approach to writing poetry? Is poetry still a morning pages thing?
Yeah, for sure. Any creative writing is stuff I do in the morning. Now, the afternoons are good for editing and revising because you're more kind of in the left brain mode. So I'm good at that. But morning, I just, I let it rip, Jennifer. I just open up the floodgates and let it rip. And, then in the afternoon, I come back and it's like, no, I don't really want to say that. I don't want to say it that way. And no, that's sloppy. And that's like, oh no, that's just embarrassing. But, that's the time for, sort of applying the scissor. But in the morning, I just open it up.
I take it that you kind of came up with a storyline and then started developing the characters and putting them into it and going with that. Is that correct? Or did you have characters first? Yeah?
Yeah, I think, the sort of classic approach is you have an idea where the story's going to go. You don't want to fly blind, So I had to plot out things. I had to have my story arc. I had to have a kind of denouement. So that was my map. That was my roadmap,
Are you thinking about the reader then? Are you thinking about what the person will get out of how you write?
To be honest, no. I don't think about the reader. I think about telling a good story. I think about writing a story I would like to read. I'm a storyteller, and I enjoy reading stories. And, there's a lot of interesting things going on with contemporary literary fiction that I think deserves attention. But for me, when I'm going to sit down and read a book, or I'm going to be in bed and I'm going to read a book, I want to be told a story. So there has to be some kind of narrative thread that helps me as a reader walk beside the character, experience what the characters are experiencing, be in the places the characters are. And I feel if I keep to those three kind of aesthetic underpinnings, and I'm happy, I'm interested in what I'm writing, I'll find my audience. So that's where I go with that, Do
you have kind of a meaning or a subtext that you kind of involved in telling the story, even if maybe it comes out organically?
Yeah, I think I do. And actually someone pointed this out to me not so long ago. I think my subtext, well, there are 3 points. Here's the Holy Trinity. It's love, it's trust, and it's betrayal. And you can apply that template to any situation in life. It doesn't have to be a romantic situation. It can be a situation with your relationship with work. It can be our political environment. It can be anything. So to me, that's the triangle. And I think that triangle emerges in one way or another in a lot of the writing I do. I've written only one novel so far, although I have others in the pipeline. But it certainly comes out in my poetry, I think. So a kind of interesting discovery that, well, it wasn't a discovery. Someone pointed it out to me. I owned it. I said, yeah, I think you're right.
What are you going to take on next?
Hopefully I have a novel in process, which is, I think, a blockbuster, really terrific, very different than Bread. And I've got some people interested in it now, so let's hope I can move that one out. And behind it, another one, and all sorts of poetry. I really want to put together a collection of my poetry. I've been writing poetry for a long time, and I've been published in some terrific places. But whenever I collect something and send it up there, people come back and they go, it's all over the place. I mean, poetry.
That's what a collection is.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've said that to editors. I'm like, it's a collection of essays.
Really? I don't want to write a book of poetry about losing weight. I mean, I'm sorry. A lot of people, it's just not my thing, or COVID or whatever, these themed books. You're reading the same poem, in 70 different pieces. So that's not my thing. So, that's on my bucket list. But, until that happens, I'm going to continue writing prose because I love it. And I love inventing characters. I have a lot more to say. So, I'm lucky that there's been a shift in weather and someone like me. An older guy who still manages to do some scribbling. It's delightful, Let's see where it goes.
Now, am I remembering correctly? You were an actor, are a performer as well?
Yeah.
Or were. Now, do you think how you approached developing a character for the stage, how does that differ from developing a character for the page?
Oh, well, it differs hugely. And I'll tell you the hybrid between those two things, stage and narrative. That would be narrating a book. When you're telling a story on the stage, your characters have to be your exposition. Your characters have to move the plot along. Unless you're doing Greek chorus, which, it's certainly a device that some people use, but in general, with a theater, writing a screenplay, writing a script, your characters are your plot. They're the mechanism for your story development. When you're writing a novel, you have a point of view. You can fill in the blanks. You can describe things the characters don't know, have no access to, depending on your point of view. So you have a variety of devices in your storytelling toolbox. The interesting thing I just recently finished an audiobook of Bread, and I had to combine the two. And it was disorienting at first, because on the whole, of course you keep your narrative thread, but you don't want to enunciate your character. For example, dialogue. The idea, sometimes it's important when you have a series of a conversational exchange between two or three characters to add tags. He said, she said, he grumbled. That's very important for orienting the reader when they're reading through dialogue in a novel. Now, obviously, in an audiobook, that's superfluous information, as long as you act each character voice. When you distinguish the character voices, you don't need those tags. And that came as a surprise to me, because here I was reading and saying, he said, she grumbled, he extorted. And when I listen to the playback, I go, oh my God, that's just awful. Take it all out, because you can clearly tell, I hope, from my narration, what character is speaking. And you have tricks to distinguish the women. And in my case, I had accents. So I could use accents when Alessandro speaks and, what are you doing? Why are you, you make me crazy with your jealousy. It's clear that it's not an American speaking, so, does that answer your question? I mean, it's an interesting question.
No, it does. So I went to college for theater, and I was a stage actress for many years. But I always find, like, when I'm developing a character, not even like on the page, like I still in my brain do the same homework I did to develop a character. Yeah. Like, what are their core memories? Even if it never ends up in the book, like, I know those things about my character the same way I would know them if I was playing a character in a play. Even if it wasn't in the play, like I would know those things. So I always love to talk to people who are theater people and also writers.
And doesn't it help with dialogue?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you hear dialogue and it sounds authentic, It's just something you develop when you have experience on stage, I think. You hear dialogue.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you work out your dialogue then? Like, do you work it out loud? Or
I work it out loud. At first, I just hear it in my head and I jot it down. But eventually, I will speak it. And so if something rings slightly false, it just changes. It just changes, because people are speaking. People are not grammatical when they speak. People mispronounce words. You have to build that into your dialogue to make it real.
Yeah, because then it doesn't sound real, like if they're too perfect.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody writing dialogue. It doesn't sound like dialogue.
Do you attach influence from people you've seen or met or even know into your characters?
Well, that was important for me when in Bread, because I wanted to master the kind of mispronunciations of English that are so typical and so charming when foreigners are speaking it. And the one thing I wanted to get in Italian, and Alessandro does this quite a bit, is there's an inversion of subject and verb, which is common in Italian, but in English it can be very funny. So there's one point where Alessandro says to Mark, I love you so much that tonight I am going to cook myself. So that's just an odd thing to hear in English. But it makes perfect sense if an Italian says it in Italian.
So anybody you know personally that you've used in your books, in this book or any of the others?
Not literally, no.
No.
They're composites of characters, including me. you know.
Yeah. You're in everything. Yeah. What's the hardest thing that you found about doing this book? What was the biggest struggle for you?
You know, there's a point in the middle of a book where you just sort of fatigue can set in. You know, you're looking for the ramp up, and it's just not there yet. So, you know, you struggle, I think, in the middle of the book with a kind of lassitude that you have to overcome. And luckily, my characters saved me. I would take a vacation from the book and just let my characters rest. And then after a few days, my characters would revivify themselves. You know, I'd hear them at night speaking to me, or I'd wake up and I had this idea for a new direction I wanted to go, and that's what would happen. So it's that slump, you know. The beginning of a story, the exposition is wonderful. It's like a spring ride in the woods. I think who was it who said that? It might have been somebody crazy like Edith Wharton, but she said, you know, the beginning of a novel is like a spring ride in the woods. The development is like a carriage stuck in mud. So, you know, everything is easily, you're putting all sorts of things on the table, and then suddenly the carriage gets stuck in the mud. You got to find a way to kind of dig it out and keep it going until you reach the end. So I guess that's the hardest part.
Yeah. And so you hear your characters a lot. Do they still let you drive, or do they
let me drive?
You know, take away your license? Do they know about this? Well, listen, do you like to interact with your readers and fans and stuff like that? Do you have social media set up for that? Do you have a website?
I do have a website. I might have, I don't know if I sent it to you, but I can resend it to you if you'd like. It's glenvecchione.com. It's a website that needs updating, but it's serviceable right now. There's a good deal of my poetry on it. Nothing about this book yet, but anyone who wants to write to me, they can write to me at my email address, which is Scaffone, SCAFFONE 61 @gmail.com.
Well, there you go. Fantastic. Now we're going to put that up along with your book. And have at her. We appreciate you being on the show, and it's Where the Night Smells Like Bread. Glen Peters, thank you.
Thank you, Alan and Jennifer. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.